Hello students. So I will start this lecture of solid state physics, the second lecture, with a simple question. Now the question is, you can see two figures over here. If I ask you which one is a powder, let me denote this. This is A and this is B. Of course you will say A is a powder, B is not a powder. Is not a powder. This is the layman definition. This is what we know about powder. That this quantity, this material is powder. This is not powder, this is solid. Now the question is, what type of solid it is? What type of solid it is? I will say this is also a powder, and of course this answer will put you in astonishment, or you will think that I am talking gibberish, that how can be a piece of chalk be powder when we know that everyone knows that A is a powder. So to understand this concept, we will study today's lecture. We will discuss this thing in today's lecture, and we will see what is a powder and what is not a powder. So let us start our topic. So today's topic is the crystalline state of matter. Crystals and crystalline matter. Crystals are all over, all around us. And you will be surprised to know that crystals are something which are dominating all over the technologies that we have around us. You will be more surprised to know that this structure it is the X-ray diffraction study and the electron microscope study of the crystals that make us, or that make all the living life. This is the DNA structure. Even if you are not a student of biology, DNA is known to everyone. DNA crystallography was done, and that won the Nobel Prize, and it is a path-breaking discovery in the field of physics. This shows that even the biological sciences have to depend on physics for in-depth study. So this is the DNA structure. This figure, the right one, it shows the DNA structures, the DNA crystals, and we are all made of DNAs. You know the importance of DNA, even if you have not read it in any book or in a particular course of biology. DNA is known to everyone. So let us start our discussion today. From where we left, we will study today the crystals and the crystalline matter. Now from a very beginning, very preliminary level, you know what is a crystal. Even in the school level we study crystalline solids and non-crystalline solids. We study the amorphous solids, crystalline solids, allotropy of carbon, among which we study the diamond structure. Diamond, it is a very astonishing structure. It is not only precious, costly, it is a strange structure. We will discuss about diamond in a separate lecture. So what we know about these crystals, that these crystals are those solids which have a definite shape, and I discussed in the last lecture, they have a sharp melting point and long range order. Means a particular arrangement of atom, they repeat, they extend to several atomic distances. So crystals are solid that have an ordered, three-dimensionally periodic structure, and the most important the most important term is this word periodic. And this periodic word defines the whole topic of X-ray crystallography, X-ray diffraction crystallography. Geometrical diffraction, geometrical structures. and they have definite conditions of formation. And the most important thing is that under some definite conditions, under some particular conditions of formation, means temperature, composition, pressure, these crystals, they take the shape of polyhedra. Polyhedra means there are many faces. And this shape of polyhedra, this is a very important, very conceptual topic when we are talking about crystals. Everything is very well arranged in crystals. Crystals are something where everything has an arrangement, where everything has an arrangement. Arrangement means everything is, you can say, ordered. They follow some rules. There are certain equations that are followed. This all defines the definiteness of the crystals. And the crystalline state, it is the most thermodynamically equilibrium state of a solid. When the atoms are coming together under certain conditions of pressure and temperature, like the crystals that are formed in nature under high temperature and pressure, the most stable state or the thermodynamically equilibrium state is the crystalline state. For every solid phase of a chemical composition means, suppose you have one type of atom A and one type of atom B, and they are coming close together and forming a bond, and they are forming a 3D structure, a arrangement of atoms. For every type of chemical composition, whether it is water, H2O or any other chemical composition, there exists one phase which is the crystalline state. For example, ice. The most significant feature of the crystal is the existence of plane surfaces of a crystal, and this is related to the entire topic of optics and crystal study. If you have studied optics and polarization, you must have studied quartz crystal. Quartz crystal is a very magnificent crystal in terms of physics. It may not be precious, but it is a very magnificent structure. The way of cutting the crystal, it defines a certain properties. You must have heard about piezoelectric crystals. And the way of cutting, it defines the piezoelectric property. So the most significant aspect of these crystals that they have plane surfaces. They are bounded by optically planed surfaces. They have sharp edges and interfacial angles. And we have a simple mathematical relation, F plus C is equal to E plus 2, where F is the number of faces, C is the number of angles, and E is the number of edges. Now this equation is a very simple equation. From the point of view of mathematics, this equation is a school level equation. You study these types of equation in standard 7, 8. But the physics inside this equation is marvelous. This equation shows that the number of phases, that the number of angles and the number of edges, they are just not random in a crystal. They are related by a mathematical equation. There is a certain there is a certain fixed relation between the three quantities, the number of phases, the number of angles, the number of edges, that defines a crystal. So crystal is all about definiteness. Crystal is all about definiteness. It is not that randomly the faces are aligned, or there is no relation among the number of faces, angles and edges. It is a strictly defined mathematical equation that exists, that relates these three quantities, and this is crystal. Now what I asked in the introductory video, that what is a powder, and all of you, even a standard 5 level student will say that this one is a powder because it is crushed, finely mixed. or crushed, you can say. So in the layman language, you have a powder which is of this form, dust form. This is the layman language. But when you are a student of solid state physics, when you are a student of graduation or post graduation, and you are studying solid state physics, you must know that of course this one is a powder. It is not that the definition of powder is not valid here. This is of course a powder. But in the solid state physics or in the scientific term, a powder is a polycrystalline solid. Now what is a polycrystalline solid? Poly means many, crystalline means crystals. So what happens in a polycrystalline solid, you can see here, there are aggregates. Aggregates means a collection of small crystals. Now see, this one is one aggregate. This one is another aggregate. This one is another aggregate. These blue circles, these are the small crystals. For the timing, you can consider this as small crystals. Crystals means definite geometrical arrangement. But the cluster, but the grouping, a particular, these crystals are arranged in different groups. And these groups, they are arranged randomly with respect to each other. So this is group 1. Group 1, this is group 2, this is group 3. They are arranged in random order, small crystals. And these groups, they have different shape. This shape is not same as this. This shape is different from this. Now if you consider that, if you consider this shape, this is another shape. This is another shape. All these shapes that are formed by the group of small crystals, they are different from each other. And they are irregular in shape. These small crystals or aggregates, they are called crystallites or crystal grains. These are called grains. And the edge that differentiates this grain from this grain is called the grain boundary. Is called the grain boundary. For this polycrystalline solid, it is same as that of a powder. It is also a kind of powder, because when you will study some methods of X-ray diffraction like Lau method and powder method, in the experiment you are given a single piece of solid and you have to take the powder photograph. You have to take the powder photograph. But when you see the sample, it is a piece of solid. So internally, the piece of chalk that I showed you in the first diagram in the introductory video, these types of solids, they are polycrystalline or powdered solids. They may not appear powder from external appearance, but they are powdered from inside. Because you see, if this is a collection, now the small single pieces of the powder, they are oriented randomly with respect to each other. Now when you fill this powder in a test tube, suppose you are filling this powder in a test tube, it takes a particular shape. Powder in test tube or in any structure, then they take a definite shape, and these particles, they are almost arranged in a definite order. So polycrystalline solid is such a solid that is formed by crystallites or aggregates that are randomly oriented with each other at the atomic level. There are crystallites, of course, but their arrangement is not a proper arrangement, not a defined arrangement. So these are powdered solids. And the properties of these powdered solids, they are defined by these arrangement of the crystallites. For example, if you take a piece of chalk and you break it, the broken section of the chalk, it appears something like this. This is the broken section of the chalk. Here the structure is quite irregular. It is irregular structure. Because it is a polycrystalline solid, or it is a powder in terms of solid state physics or material science. But when you cut a crystal, for example a crystal of quartz, it is not so. This diagram further shows the polycrystal. This is a polycrystalline solid. Polycrystalline solid. These are the boundaries. Let me show it to you a different ink. These are the boundaries. This is one particular aggregate where there are crystallites. This one is randomly arranged with respect to this one. This one is randomly arranged with respect to this one. This one is randomly arranged with respect to this one. So this is the microscopic view of a polycrystalline solid. But when you have a crystalline solid and you cut it, this is a crystalline solid. You see that the pieces are of definite geometrical shape. This thing can be further studied from this diagram, where you can see the grain boundaries and the grains. These structures are the grains, and the separation, these lines are the grain boundaries. A grain contains many crystallites that are arranged in a random order, and each grain is randomly oriented with respect to the neighboring grain. Each grain is randomly oriented with respect to the other grains, with respect to the other grains. This is the condition for polycrystalline solid. Polycrystalline solid. So here again, for your better understanding, you can see this diagram. These are of definite pattern. These are the small crystals, individual minute crystal, but the collection of this minute crystal, which I am showing by this red boundary, this is one grain, and this is different from this grain. This one is different from this grain. This one is different from this grain, and this grain. So these collection of small crystals, they are oriented randomly in a polycrystalline or a powder solid. So this is a powder. It may appear strange to the layman that you are saying a single piece of a solid, you are saying it a powder, but from the microscopic view, it is a powder. When you see the crystalline solids, so this chalk, it is a powder, or you can say it is a polycrystalline solid. Polycrystalline solid. This is a polycrystalline solid, and it is a powder. So this is the definition that of a polycrystalline and a crystalline solid. Now what you have, you can see again here, this is a single crystal. I will describe the single crystal in detail. You can see that all these small crystals, they are arranged in a definite manner. This is the arrangement, this is the arrangement, this is the arrangement. This is a single crystal. I will describe what is a single crystal, and this is a polycrystal. In this boundary, in this region, the arrangement is something like this. In this region, the arrangement is different from this. In this region, the arrangement is different from these two regions. So atoms are repeating within a grain, and grains, they are separated by boundaries that are called the grain boundaries. The repeating patterns are randomly oriented. So when you cut a polycrystal or when you break a polycrystal, the surface, or let me show it like this, the surface of a piece of chalk, broken chalk, appears like this. But when you consider this crystal, sodium chloride or blue quartz or snowflake, They have a definite arrangement that repeats throughout the structure. So right now, what you can say, in a single crystal, a definite geometrical pattern, repeats itself, throughout the space or in 3D, throughout the space or in 3 dimensions. Even still, if you have some confusion, if you are still not getting a clear picture, I am giving you a picture which I think will remove your confusion, and it is a very well-known object. It is a very well-known object. Almost all of us have used this, have seen this, and this is the Rubik's Cube. This is a single crystal because same type of pattern, square boxes, they are repeating throughout the 3 dimension. Single crystal. This is your Rubik's Cube. That is a game which is known all over. Every one of us have heard this. Rubik's Cube. So this is a single crystal. Polycrystalline materials, they are also sometimes called semi-crystalline, although the term is not very correct. And I have seen some textbooks, they are writing polycrystalline or semi-crystalline, but semi-crystalline is something different. So if you are required to define this polycrystalline solid, so you can define it like this, in this way, that a polycrystalline solid or a powder, the so-called powder is a solid where the crystallites, I have defined what are the crystallites. They grow together in the form of interlocking patterns that are oriented randomly with each other. Crystallites which grow and form an interlocking pattern that are separated from each other by boundaries called grain boundaries. And each pattern is called grain, This is the definition of a polycrystalline solid. I will still suggest you to not to use the term semi-crystalline in this situation, but because semi-crystalline solids are something different. But many textbooks are writing like this, so maybe in your college they are using this term. So this is a polycrystalline solid. You can see this is one grain, this is another grain. These grains are randomly oriented and they are separated by boundaries. Grains are randomly oriented from each other forming the polycrystalline material. Polycrystalline material. And the small crystals in these small boxes, they are called the crystallites. So this is the different type of solid, different type of crystalline material, polycrystal or powder. So these grains, these individual regions, they are oriented differently. For getting more clear understanding, if you still have any problem, if you have studied the domain theory of ferromagnetism, then you can relate this thing, that what happens in a ferromagnetic domain in the presence of magnetization and in absence of magnetization. So let me give you an image that will make the things more clear if you still have some problem. So you can see these images. You can see these images that this is domain where when they are randomly oriented. These are the boundaries as I described the grains in this case, and inside them there are dipoles, there are crystallites in the and when there is a magnetic field, they are align themselves. So these structures, although the things are different here, you can see that these are the grains. For your understanding, I have given this picture, and this I have taken from Google Images. So this is the clear-cut definition between polycrystalline powdered solid and a crystalline solid. I will discuss the single crystals in more detail. So there are many examples like rocks, sand, and then you have many natural salts, metals. They are polycrystalline structure. Metal, they are all polycrystalline structure. Now, one important and very interesting thing is that a polycrystalline structure can be built into a single crystal structure under suitable conditions. And this example is again very relevant if you have seen bricks that are used for constructing houses, constructing buildings. Now, why I am giving this example? When you are considering bricks, these bricks are prepared in brick kilns. And what you see, that it is nothing but a collection of soil. It is soil that is mixed with water, and it is heated in a kiln. What happens during heating? That the particles are arranged in a more definite manner, and there is a densification process. So under particular temperature, and maybe some other physical conditions, the polycrystalline solid can be formed or can be changed or can form a single crystal. So this is the definition, this is the clear-cut differentiation between polycrystalline and a powder or a single crystal solid. In the next lecture, we will talk about the structure of the single crystals or the crystalline states, and that is the most important thing. So for the time being, please subscribe the channel, watch the videos and share your comments so that I can improve if there is any shortcoming. Thank you.